organizations have worked in partnership to make this event happen today. They are Transparency International Sri Lanka, or TISL, the National Chapter of Transparency International, the Global Coalition Against Corruption, and South Asians for Human Rights, or SAHAR, a regional network with a membership base across South Asia of individuals and institutions committed to fostering human rights and good governance at national and regional levels. Our first speaker this morning is Dr. Vijaya Jayatilaka, the Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. He will formally welcome you to this event.
Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Honourable Members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, representatives from the embassies. I would particularly like to mention the fact that there are a few Honourable Members of Parliament who accepted our invitation to be panelists after tea. Reverend Athurali Ratana, Dr. Jayalat Jayawardena, Ms. Rosie Senanayaka, Iran Vikramanayaka, Dr. Harsha De Silva, and M.A. Sumantiran. You're warmly welcome. When looking at the image of the Parliament, I must say, from Gordon Gardens to Golface, and then on to Sri Jayawardenapura, the legislature has moved geographically. Further, the legislature has changed in name, stature, and influence, making its appearance in the political landscape of the country as the Legislative Council in 1833, the State Council in 1931, and then as the House of Representatives in 1942, the National State Assembly in 1972, and finally, Parliament in 1978. The institution has certainly changed in name. Most countries have robust systems that examine the functioning of the legislature, based on which improvements are made. This diagnosis is an inevitable requirement if people are to benefit consistently from this powerful and influential institution. It is within the ideals of democracy that the legislator is examined. It is through review and analysis that we are able to identify areas for upscaling, for improvement, or for change.
I would now like to invite Ms. Siranthi Jayatilaka, the Executive Director of South Asians for Human Rights, to give us an introduction to the Parliament Watch program.
It's my pleasure to introduce you all to the Parliament Watch program, initiated by South Asians for Human Rights, and to share a brief history of the program as well as its objectives. The Parliament Watch program research focuses on how existing laws, regulations deviate from proposed SAHA guidelines and the basic principles of good governance and accountability. The study also identifies and records the level of parliamentary commitment to include legislation pertaining to good governance and human rights, and also their responsiveness to human rights concerns. This study has been successfully implemented in Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka.
Next, I call upon Mr. Buvindra Ilangage to tell us about the efforts of SAHAR to promote the basic principles of good governance and accountability among the legislators in the South Asian region.
The Right to Transparent Governance program of South Asians for Human Rights, or SAHA for short as we call it, in 2007 resulted in a study on the legislatures of Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. The recommendations that SAHA has made on the calendar of sessions and business of Parliament, very briefly to summarize a few, are as follows. That it is ensured that the sessions and sittings, the calendar of sessions and sittings, is published in the official gazette and circulated to all members of Parliament.
Relevance of Parliament Watch. Sometimes many of us perhaps in the media who tend to be more cynical than the general public sometimes wonder whether Parliament itself is relevant today. Quality of parliamentarians that you see in the Sri Lanka Parliament today, with a few notable exceptions, some of whom are present in this gathering, is nowhere up to the standards that we saw.
This survey report was compiled by Transparency International Sri Lanka and captures some of the best practices observed during the proceedings of Sri Lanka's parliament.
We started a baseline study in 2010 and we still continue. I'll just take about 5 minutes just to share some of the key findings. They are not necessarily real findings, but these are like, we want to just benchmark against some of the South Asian parliaments and to see how the Sri Lankan parliament has also performed during the 2 years in which we conducted this survey.
I rushed through this, one of the documents given to me regarding making certain recommendations. About 10 or 9 recommendations are there. I found some good constructive recommendations are there. Some are, of course, some implementable, some of course unimplementable. So, but anyway, it's a very good attempt and initiative, because at least we can be satisfied there's a segment of the society who are interested in making Parliament more vibrant and dynamic. So in that regard, let me once again thank Dr. Jayatillaka and other organizers for having organized this forum and enable us also to participate. There are a large number of members of Parliament are here. I can see just on the face number of immediate, some of the fundamental reasons why we have come to such a situation. This is my personal conviction, I reiterate it. One question is the executive presidency. Whether you may not agree with me, but I have told you with the president, previous president, and on the floor of the House, even as the minister of the government, I take that position. Some of the maladies that originated from the day that the executive presidency was installed in our country.
I am indeed pleased that this National Forum on Parliamentary Best Practices have come into being. To me, the complaints that we hear about decline in parliamentary standards is not simply an endemic problem to our country alone. It's connected to the evolution of our parliamentary democracy. Whatever the shortcomings in the institutions of governance in this country, the 3 main arms of government, be it parliament, be it the executive, or be it the judiciary, we Sri Lankans can certainly be proud that we have a very vibrant media culture. And we do have a very mature civil society who is able to hold these institutions of governance in this country to account.
On behalf of the organizers, I thank the guests of honor for accepting this invitation and being with us today. I would also like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here at this important event. Transparency International and Sahar call upon you all to provide input to this initiative in the future, and if you have any ideas or suggestions, do contact Dilruk Handunatti from Transparency International Sri Lanka or Mr. Buvindra Ilangagamage from SAHR if you need to. As I said, this is the end of this part of the workshop today.
The first panel discussion today will be on the topic of citizens' role in enhancing public access to Parliament. We have invited Ms. Shanti Satyanandan to be our moderator, and I will invite her to introduce the panelists.
The Parliament, being the supreme body where all major decisions are taken related to the governance of this country, naturally becomes the focus of attention to every vigilant citizen. And that's why we have taken up this theme of, is there a role for the citizen in enhancing public access to Parliament? Let me introduce the Honourable Mr. Era Wickramaratne. He is a Member of Parliament under the national list of the United National Party.
There was a comment about the executive presidency being probably the root of all evils. And it was interesting that I told the distinguished speakers that I'll be speaking behind their back if they're not here. The fact that actually there was a lack of personal responsibility, I think, so far in the discourse, because not only do you have a powerful executive, you have an 18th Amendment, and an 18th Amendment for which you have voted. When I think that nothing's going to change until people begin to take some personal responsibility. What's Parliament's function? It has a legislative function, it has responsibility for finance, it has a responsibility to hold the executive, to hold the executive accountable, and it has a responsibility to basically reflect public concern. If I would put it in a nutshell, I would say these are the four important functions that Parliament has. But this Parliament, or even a previous Parliament, didn't even have a finance minister. We are facing a huge economic crisis at the moment, and there's no finance minister.
Parliament කියලා කියන්නේ රටේ ජනතාවගෙන් වියෝග වෙච්ච එකක් නෙවෙයි. රටේ ජනතාවගේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය, ඔවුන්ගේ සංස්කෘතික හික්මීම සහ සමාජීය වටිනාකම් කොපමණ තියෙනවද කියන එක නිරූපණය වෙන්නේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ. ජනමාධ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය. ජනමාධ්‍ය පිළිබඳ සාකච්ඡාවක් කරගත්තොත් ජනමාධ්‍ය වේදීන්ට එයට සහභාගී වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහිදී ස්ථාවර නියෝගවල කිසිම තහනමක් ලබා දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ නිසා මේ ජනමාධ්‍ය පිළිබඳ තීරණයක් ගැනීමේදී කාරණය දැනුවත් කරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒ අදාළ අයට පුළුවන් ඒකට සහභාගී වෙන්න. හැබැයි අපේ රටේ දැනට එහෙම සම්ප්‍රදායක් හැදිලා නැහැ.
We have with us here Mr. Elmo Pereira, who is an all too familiar figure to those of us from the civil society organization.
Article 3 of our Constitution says very clearly that sovereignty is in the people, that is us, and is inalienable. Inalienable means that we cannot give it to anybody else. Now, and then Article 4 says how this sovereignty, our sovereignty, will be exercised through Parliament, through the executive, between the executive, the legislature and the executive.
I think if you want to improve public access and public trust in Parliament, you have to make that different. And it is different.
The majority of people in this country do not know what is happening in Parliament. For example, there is a document known as the order book. There is a document known as the order paper. Now, these are rarely available to the public. So I would request that some system be put into practice where these documents are made available at every divisional secretariat, every post office, every municipal, urban council, Pradeshiya Sabha. It might mean, but that is the only way in which the public are aware of what is happening in Parliament.
ගරු පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීතුමා සඳහන් කරා මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙකුට හිමිවන මාසික වැටුප් ප්‍රමාණවත් නැහැ කියලා. එය තවදුරටත් පැහැදිලි කරොත්.
වැඩි කිරීම පිළිබඳව ඒ පැත්තට යොමු කරන ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෙමෙයි. මම මේ ප්‍රශ්නය ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නේ අපි දන්නවා විධායකය තිබෙනවා, ඒ වගේම ව්‍යවස්ථාදායකය තියෙනවා. මේවා අතරේ යම්කිසි වෙනස් වීමක් තියෙන්නට ඕනේ යහපාලනය සඳහා. නමුත් අඩු වේතනයට කවුරු හරි ව්‍යවස්ථාදායකයට ආපුවාම ඔහුට ඒකෙන් ජීවත් වෙන්න බොහොම අපහසුයි. අපි සියලු දෙනාම දන්නවා മന്ത്രി කෙනෙක් ගත්තාම മന്ത്രിට අනික් අය වගේම ඔහුගේ පවුල බලා ගන්නවට අමතරව, දී වේදන් වලට අමතරව මහජන සේවයේ සිටින නිසා ඊට වැඩිය හුඟක් වේදන් තියෙනවා.
පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ දැන් අපි හිතමු පනතක් එනවා. අපි හිතමු කෘෂිකර්මයේ පිළිබඳ පනතක් එනවා. විශේෂ රෙගුලේෂන් එකක් පාස් වුණා. ඒ රෙගුලේෂන් එක අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම උපදේශකාරක සභාවේ සාකච්ඡා වෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක සමහර වෙලාවට හදිසි පනච් කියලා දැන් අලුත් සෙල්ලමක් පටන් ගන්න තියෙනවා මම නම් ඒකට සම්පූර්ණ විරුද්ධයි. හදිසි පනච් කියලා මොකක්ද තියෙන හදිසිය? ඕනම පනතක් මේ හදිසි පනච් කියලා සම්මත කරනවා. ඒක දැන් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක සම්පූර්ණයෙන් වැරදි.
When you think for a moment that at this point in Sri Lanka, and this has been the case for a number of years, human rights and the problems and challenges with regard to human rights protection in this country has been especially acute. At the same time, we have a parliament in which the government of the day accused both nationally as well as internationally of not doing anywhere near enough with regard to human rights protection, and indeed also being accused of violating the human rights of its citizens.
There is a sort of a censorship, self-imposed censorship that parliamentarians, I think, by and large, adhere to themselves. So it is not necessarily that, I guess, you can't speak about these issues, but it is not spoken about. I mean, it's the same case, I think, in the media.
Can people petition the petitions committee, or is it only about the code of ethics or something on MPs? Can we use that as a vehicle to get the parliamentarians to respond to the issues of economic and human rights issues?
Possibility of your getting a petition raised, but the one difficulty is you will have to go through a member of parliament and he will have to first show it to the speaker, get his approval. But apart from that, there is no difficulty in getting a matter of even human rights raised.
I'd like to call upon Mrs. Sanjana Hattotua, Senior Researcher at the Center for Policy Alternatives, to lead the discussion.
The bias of the editors and the market model of media, which perhaps prevents as much as an investigative, interrogative viewpoint as we would like in holding parliamentarians accountable. With regards to open parliament, I think that's very interesting, because if you take a look at the average age of this audience, it might be upwards of 45. And the world seems to be being shaped and shifted by a younger demographic who are impatient with fora such as this and instead demand direct accountability through means that they now already have in their hands.
මාධ්‍ය සංස්කෘතිය විතරක් නෙමෙයි, පාර්ලිමේන්තු සංස්කෘතිය විතරක් නෙමෙයි, අධිකරණයේද හැම තැනක්ම බැලුවම තියෙන අවුල් ජාලයක. නමුත් මගේ මතය කිසිම තැනක් ස්වාධීනත්වය හෝ ගෞරවය එළියෙන් වක් කරන්න බෑ. මම හිතන්නේ ඒක ඇතුලෙන් එන්න ඕන දෙයක්. අභිලාෂයක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට මේක අවශ්‍යයි කියන්නේ. මම හිතන්නේ මේ ආයතන කිසිම ආයතන ක්‍රමයකට තාම එහෙම අභිලාෂයක් වෙන්නලා තියෙනවා.
Before we come to a close, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to thank on behalf of Transparency International Sri Lanka and South Asians for Human Rights for your presence and for your attention today, and would like to draw your attention to a special presentation to show our appreciation.